Hi everybody, welcome to Chart Chat. Now, this is future Andy re-recording the introduction. Future Andy is also on holiday at the moment, hence the stubble and scruffy hair. I hope that's okay. Turns out, when we did the live broadcast, my introduction actually got cut out and the recording didn't start until 20 seconds in. So, with that, it's not Chart Chat, it's Chit Chat. No, it's not Chit Chat, it's Chart Chat. Let's introduce ourselves and get on with the recording. Steve, say hello.
Hey, I'm Steve Wexler. I'm the founder, principal, and sole employee of Data Revelations. I am one of the three authors of the Big Book of Dashboards, and it was those discussions and debates I had with the two authors, co-authors, that led to wanting to do Chart Chat, and I am the author of the just released The Big Picture, and delighted to be here with my Chart Chat chums, and thank you for that unprovoked plugging of the book, Ben, and delighted to be here with Ben Shneiderman. Thanks much. And Andy.
Yeah, I'm always happy to plug your book, Steve. Okay, Jeff, say hi. Thank you, Steve.
Jeff Shaffer here from Cincinnati, Ohio, Chief Operating Officer at Unifund and adjunct professor at the University of Cincinnati, where I teach data visualization and co-author of the Big Book of Dashboard with Steve and Andy.
Thank you, Jeff. And Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda Makulec. I am the Executive Director for the Data Visualization Society. I also work as the Data Visualization Lead for Excella, a consulting firm based here in Washington, D.C., where I am located. And amazed that it has gotten hotter out on the West Coast this past week than it has in D.C., where normally the 4th of July is our big inflection point towards total humidity and absolute summer. So very excited to be here today with my co-hosts and with Ben, who has escaped the DC metro area, it seems, for Vancouver and the hot temperatures out there.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks, Amanda. And I'm in Oxford in England, and it's just a typical English June. It's not very nice. So we have a very special guest with us today. Ben Shneiderman is going to talk about various things, including human-centered AI. So I'll get Ben to introduce himself in a minute, because that's kind of the first section of the show today. So hold your fire, Ben. But as Steve says, we create Chart Chat because we thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and debate that we had during the creation and writing of Big Book of Dashboards. We love agreement, but we love debate, even disagreement. So please use the chat window as extensively as you want, because we can bring as many of those conversations to life in the next hour. And if you stay for the after party, the next hour and a half. So in a minute, Ben is going to tell you a little bit about himself and his influence on the field we all work in. We'll talk about that. Then he's going to talk about his work in human-centered AI and explainability in artificial intelligence, and sharing some of the ideas we might be able to see what AIs are apparently thinking. Definitely air quotes for the word thinking. So that's going to be the sort of first hour. After that, we have the legend, the after party. Ben is going to stick around. You can share your thoughts or ask Ben further questions. I have to leave after an hour. I have an appointment, and it honestly isn't with the England versus Germany football, which starts in an hour. It is for something else. But one of my other fine hosts will take that on. So hopefully that sounds like a great episode. And our first section, therefore, is going to be the question to Ben. Ben, so who are you? Say hi and tell us a little bit about yourself. Thanks for joining the show.
Hi. Well, thanks for the opportunity. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I just like the happy-spirited style of this group. I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Maryland, where I've spent my career, and now emeritus from that, but very busy with a bunch of things. And here in Vancouver, the picture behind me is the view out the window. A few months ago when there was still snow on the mountains, but as you've heard, it's kind of hot today. The last 3 days I've broken all kinds of temperature records, and I'll use that in the visualizations in a little while. So I'll get in, and if I can share my screen, I can show you some of the things we're talking about. Are we ready for that, or you want to move on?
Sounds good.
We are.
Go share away.
I'm going to tell some of the background stories of Spotfire, tree maps, and then we'll move on to the latter topics of the road to explainable AI. I'm most proud to wave the flag of the University of Maryland and the Human-Computer Interaction Lab, now on its 8th director, Nicholas Elmquist, after 38 years, a wonderful community between computer science and the rapidly growing School of Information Studies with others on campus, including MITH, the Maryland Institute for Technology and the Humanities. There's 1,000 tech reports on our website, and hundreds of videos, projects, and so on. So take a look at that. I hope some of you know me from my book, Designing the User Interface, now in 6th edition, to tell the remarkable story of how this moderate-sized community produced the dramatic effects that change our culture every day, that led to the mobile devices, to e-commerce, the web design, and so on. My claims to fame are, 3 of these are easy to talk about. They're small things, but sometimes small things have a huge impact. So the idea of the link is an old idea, goes back to Vannevar Bush in 1945, but we created the visual interface of highlighted in light blue words in the middle of a sentence that you could click on and go somewhere. And we had done about a dozen studies, believe it or not, of different colors and different ways to show the links and the ways to make the transitions. And it's that we published in Communication of the ACM early in the 80s. And Tim Berners-Lee saw what we did in some of the packages we built with Cognetics Corporation, a commercial version of these systems, and then put that in his Spring '89 manifesto for the web. And so that's where the colors come from. It just made the web work in a wonderful way. We also were working on tiny touchscreens, and at the time, touchscreens in the late 80s were 9 inches across, an inch square buttons for each letter. We made 7-inch, 5-inch, and 3-inch keyboards, and that worked by the trick of when you put your finger on the screen, you get a cursor instead of activation. Most systems were land-on activation systems, and we did the idea that you put the cursor and then you can slide your finger around and lift off to be very precise. One of the reviewers for the paper in the journal didn't believe we could do it, so we had to create a video, and this is that image from the video of those tiny touchscreen keyboards. Steve Jobs visited our lab in October '88, and I became a consultant for Apple for 5 years, and so that's how some of the history got done. I'm also the holder of the patent for photo tagging, where you could drag the names of family or colleagues onto a screen. It would stick and click, and then you could search all your photo database for a particular name. So those are easy to talk about, but most of my work has been in this world of visualization. And the 4 ones I chose to feature was Spotfire, our work in the middle 90s. Christopher Ahlberg was a student visiting us from Sweden in 1991 and again in the summer of '93. And this paper from the ACM's CHI conference, Computer Human Interaction Conference in '94, led to the start of Spotfire in 1997 by Chris Ahlberg and friends. I served on the board of directors for 5 years, and it grew to 200 people and was bought by TIBCO in 2007. It continues as one of the premier tools, not as widely known as Tableau, which has been a huge success by colleagues like Pat Hanrahan and Jack McInlay. The ideas we put forward in that early version were the idea of double box sliders by which you could set ranges and explore the multiple windows, which were coordinated so that any change in the sliders updated all those windows in 160 milliseconds. You also could brush and link and explore the data sets. And these become common techniques that allow exploration in rapid ways. Also the developer of the tree maps. This version is one by a company called FinViz. You can look at the stock market, and this one shows the 11 sectors of the stock market, and each company is sized by its market capitalization. So you get Apple and Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and so on. The green shows it's rising since yesterday, but you can reset it to be last week, last year. There's lots of other variables. We'll take a look at one in a while. You can then see the patterns in the different sectors. So when tech sectors are green and up, you may find the quieter utility sectors to be more red. And that's what you see here. We also contributed to the development of Node Excel, run by the Social Media Research Foundation, the most widely used tool for network visualization and exploration. We've done a second edition of the book. Mark Smith continues to run this, and that's a new and growing direction for network visualization that's now drawn many competitors. The later work was on patient histories and visualization of that in a tool called EventFlow, which allowed us to explore the data. This one was a great project with Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. to study the patterns of treatment for pediatric emergency room arrivals. And there's a certain pattern that the physicians are expected to follow, and only about half the patients got the right sequence of treatment. The 29 other ways in which the treatment was poorly applied, incorrectly applied, were shown here. This stunned the directors, and it's another example of how visualization opens your eyes to see things that weren't otherwise visible. They just had no idea what was going on, all right? And so that changed their training mechanisms, and they've redone the studies and improved their performance. So those are the kind of more complex environments that support exploration that I've worked on. Spotfire, as I say, has flourished as a company that's done lots of things and included the tree maps into their design and their toolkit, but it's a very powerful tool used for pharmaceutical drug discovery and many other applications. FinViz, I mentioned, company has taken this on. I worked with early versions through Market Map, a Dow Jones company, Smart Money Corporation. And this shows another example on a particularly good day when everybody's doing really green. But you can see it was a bad day for Amazon, for Netflix, NVIDIA, and AMD. So the features stand out. It's really a dramatic one. And it does take a little while for people to get to learn to use it, but that gets people over it. There's a great story. This really relates to the story that you guys have been telling in the big book of dashboards. Well, there it is, which I enjoy. You have great examples that are realistic and very tuned to specific problems. And that's what works for visualization. Tune into these specific problems. Early on in our development of the tree maps, we have been licensing our version to, it turned out, 17 companies. And we had a great enthusiast from one of the big railroad companies in the US. And he just loved tree maps, and he was trying to promote it for use throughout the company. But he wasn't doing well. He did training courses. He showed them the tools and how to use it, but it just didn't go over. And then he began to understand the lesson that you guys teach so well, which is it has to be very specifically tuned to the problem that you face. And so he went around, he talked to the managers of those who were dealing with freight or with grain or with shipping of cars in the Midwest, in the Northeast. And he dealt with the failures of engines and the repair schedules. And one after another, he talked to the managers. And then he set up the particular tree map that was relevant to the task of that manager. And he made them automatically appear on their desktop when they open their file in the morning. And that worked. They loved it from there on. They had to do nothing. They just looked at the screen and they saw the red dots, and that's what they went after. Or the red boxes, rather. That's what they went after. So that's what, the power of tree maps is. I've worked with a company called Visual Action, which is taken on, and they call them flare maps. And I'm going to try to do a little demo here of one of their simple applications. Let me bring it over to the screen. And there we go. So this is their demo of a world map, very simple. And it shows it's organized by the continents. So you have Asia over here, and it's sized by the population. So China's the big one, then India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and so on. In Africa, the biggest country, if you didn't know, is Nigeria. In Europe, the biggest population is Russia, then Germany. In North America, US, then Mexico and Canada. And then we have South America down over here. Brazil's the big country here. So the color pattern is by the growth rate. And so those that are growing fast are brighter blue. Those that are doing poorly are in red. And we can see some countries like Syria, understandably, Romania, and others have been doing poorly, like El Salvador. And it's great because, you know, the things that stand out are the things you're really interested in. Now we could change the color to the area, and you get a very different pattern, and you begin to understand that, or population density. And then you come to find out that the high population density country is Bangladesh, with a population of 162 million, but a small area, and so that stands out. And of course, Singapore is also highly dense. So it does show the features very well. You can filter out the small countries on the left here and just see the big countries. Whoa, we've gone way too far. Or we can get rid of some of the big countries that are taking so much of the screen real estate, and then we can begin to see more space for the other countries. Okay, so there's lots of other features and ways to link it together, but I thought I'd give a mention of this tool for this, you know, small company that's really doing well in promoting the tree map idea.
Fantastic. That's brilliant.
Let me just say,
sorry.
The goal of visualization is insight, not pictures. Okay, that's really one of the things to remember, and that's something well understood. And I just add one more here, which is the information visualization mantra, something I playfully tossed out, but has become a key idea, which we can talk about. Overview first, zoom and filter, then details on demand. It was well considered, but it was, I say, playfully written in this paper this way in a second level conference in 1996. And that paper, which was, you know, it was just sort of, there was no evidence, there was no data, it was just an idea. It has more than 6,000 citations in Google Scholar, a rather remarkable thing. So some ideas really catch on and travel well. And I think what people liked about it is it asserted the centrality of human participation. It was the human, the person, who got the overview first. Then they zoomed in on what they wanted, they filter out what they don't want, and then they click for details on demand. And people have made jokes of this, they've argued with it, and it's just a good starting point. So, and I think there's one more here. I just grabbed today's New York Times, shows you the heat story that's going on here in Vancouver and the Pacific Northwest, that the extreme heat in Portland, you can see the pattern of Portland from January to December is of rising temperatures, and they get over 100 from time to time, but they've never had anything like the last 3 days. Never. It just went up to about 116 degrees in Portland, Oregon, the place we think of as being pretty cool and comfortable. Vancouver has even a lower pattern, and it usually gets around 80 in the summer, and maybe once or twice into the 90s. But the last 3 days here early in June were really standout days that went way above. And so here's another great case of the graphic telling the story in a compelling way. So that's my pitch here. And let me take a break and take a breath and see what you have to say, and take a sip of iced coffee.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's an incredible history. I told my kids, or I told my family, I was like, we've got data viz legend Ben Shneiderman on today. And they're like, who? So I was like, he did the visualization mantra, overview, details on demand, or zoom and filter, details on demand. They didn't bat an eyelid. And then I said, yeah, but he also kind of helped invent touchscreen keyboards, blue hyperlinks, and photo tagging. And they're like, oh, that sounds cool. So what an amazing, it's an amazing history you've got. I've got one question. I'm interested in tree maps. What was the eureka moment where you thought, I don't need to do this as a scatter plot or a bar chart or a double bar chart. But this, using a square with squares in it, will be the answer.
Yeah.
Do you remember that moment?
Well, we in our lab, we had a computer that was shared by 14 users, and it had at the time a giant 80 megabyte hard drive, and it regularly filled up. And so I had to sort of run around and figure out who is it that needs to dump some files. And, you know, it takes a while till you go through those 14 folders and find out who it is. And I sort of wanted to have one screen, which without scrolling showed me everything of what was on the hard drive. And I worked on that for months and months, had various ideas. And then one day in the faculty lounge, there I was having a cup of coffee, and boom, I got this, this aha moment. And it took me 3 days to convince myself that it really would work and write the 6 lines of recursive code that would do the trick. So the original algorithm was slice and dice. For each layer, you would slice the screen up and rectangles, and then dice it as you went down, and slice and dice. So it was that strategy. And others began to like this idea, and they added other things like the squarified tree maps, and then we added 3 more algorithms. And now there's a lot of them, and there's Voronoi tree maps, there's circular tree maps, there's all kinds of tree maps, and there's thousands of papers about designs of tree maps. But tree maps caught on. It took longer than I thought. I thought, that this hard drive explorer would be on every PC and Mac within 2 years. And there are tools that let people do it, but it took a lot longer. And
yeah.
Excel finally added tree maps in 2013, so that was a big thing. Tableau and Spotfire and the other Viz tools did it, and it's become a general tool. The New York Times caught on early, and they began to use tree maps. Hannah Fairfield over there, a great designer with them, Financial Times, BBC, everybody began to do it. The journalists were really in the lead, and now it's become a very, very common feature. And you guys mentioned it in the book. So
we do.
What more can I
Yeah.
lie?
Yeah, indeed. Well, it's a wonderful way to display information in a rectangular space. Really works. So it's amazing to see that impact. Jeff, I think, did you have a question?
I do. Yeah.
Comment?
I guess, I'm going to share my screen quick. The interesting thing that I find about tree maps is, the hierarchical data. It shows the hierarchical data of, different nodes. And in that instance, it works really well. This is basically, hopefully you can see my screen. Yep. This is the population viz that you just did. And what's interesting about it is you can go across a node, being at a continent level and a country level, you can make comparisons. This is the country of India, and you can look at that size of a country of India, and you can compare that to the continent of Africa, which you couldn't do with another tool like a bar chart. Would be very difficult to do that. You'd have to have every slice of the bar for continent and country to try to make that comparison. I guess my question for you would be, what are your views when it's used in a categorical way? If you have thousands of categories and it's not hierarchical, have you seen good uses of that where, or bad uses of that where it's not enough categories to make sense, or maybe you don't think it works for a categorical?
Sure. I mean, people get very creative at the margin. So yes, I've seen tree maps with just 3 or 4 boxes, and I'm saying, why that? I've seen tree maps, with 1 million boxes, and I'm wondering about that one as well. So people have adopted various strategies. I can't get critical of them. I just think it's great that people are exploring and trying different things. I think there are ways to improve tree maps, like the one you just showed there. The labeling was below optimal. I mean, the labels need to be readable, especially if you print them in a newspaper. And so, one nice adjustment was an algorithm that made the rectangles always horizontal, so you could squeeze more of the labels in. And then what a nice, addition. And it turns out there's a lot of creativity in exploring how to do that. And so you do want to make sure labels are as visible as possible. And then, I'm a great fan of the sliders. So I like the dynamics on there. And I know you guys, we can argue about this one, but in both of your books, you've got a little reservation about interactivity, and you're not a big fan of sliders. So tell me why not?
Yeah, brilliant. Paul asks, what do you think of Makulec charts, Ben? Do you have an opinion on those? Because they kind of play with bars and area. Sorry, Ben, did you hear that? Do you know, Ben, sorry, question. Do you know Makulec charts? Do you have an opinion on those?
I remember seeing them. No, I don't. I need to take back a little bit.
Okay. Paul, maybe
my question back to you guys. I'll turn the tables and ask a question myself, which is, why not interactivity?
On tree map?
On anything.
Why not interactivity? This is.
I think we're one of the fans of interactivity.
You're not going to get much argument from me.
Oh, but you put down interactivity and suggest, and you don't just talk about slider boxes, double box sliders. So there's a, and I understand there's a certain utility, as I told with my railroad story, of just showing a dashboard. But I'm a great fan of giving people interactivity. I should say, I understand your reservation. The New York Times.
I have no reservation.
Yeah, no, I don't think we have any reservation on that.
Ben, mate,
that's fake news.
Have we inadvertently written in our book, and has everybody interpreted we don't like interactivity? Because
I'm concerned. If you look at our, I think of the complaints dashboard has a date slider on it. Some of the other dashboards in the book definitely have interactivity, and I think we're all fans of interactivity. It's I think that's probably the power, for me, that's one of the reasons I love Tableau so much, because it's easy to add interactivity to something. So yeah, we're all about interactive dashboards.
Great. Okay.
Phew.
I don't know. We can find something else to
very nervous.
I'm glad we got this cleared up.
Very nervous there for a second about what was in that book about those different.
Yeah, we better check the chapters. Version 2.
Ben's been going around his academic circles for the last 3 years, going, God, I have to be in support of these guys who wrote this book, but they didn't like interactivity. God.
Wait, hold on. Wait, and in the big picture, there's an entire chapter about the importance of interactivity.
Well, I think we've talked before too about the importance of kind of the balancing of interactivity in a dashboard setting or somewhere else where you need to explore data, and then also the interactivity of how you place yourself in the data, which I think you talk about in the big picture, Steve, of like how do you see yourself kind of in the data or in the visualization. Well,
that was Ben's piece of brilliance with the railroad company when you say, why are these people not reacting to it? And when they created these custom tree maps where their particular fiefdom was the centerpiece of the visualizations, everyone started using it. It became, you made this thing all about me or pertinent to me. And it became a huge hit. So, as Ben, when you were describing that and saying, get the focus of this thing right, it was just, I was hearing angels singing.
or where you say, like, what is the first thing that I see, right? So that's what strikes me, and I've heard from clients too, is what's being served up to me first, and then what do I have to do to then kind of drill in a bit more. I think there's some great questions in the chat too, asking about this kind of drawback of kind of a paper print version of something versus the interactive version. I'll give all of you kudos that many of your dashboards from the big book of dashboards, people can go play with on your webpage, which is very helpful. But Tim asked about the balancing interactivity with the needs of accessibility and the challenges of building out kind of an accessible interactive interface. Ben, do you have thoughts about that as someone who's worked in this space for a long time?
Well, visualization in general is a challenge to those who have visual limitations. So we and many others have explored sonification as an alternative or a complement. And so there are growing movement of ways to do it, but it's so tempting. Visualization is such a powerful approach, and visual information presentation is so rich that we do go there, but we need to keep in touch with the needs of those who have limitations of visual limitations. The one you mentioned about the sliders or buttons being more difficult are also a challenge, but well-designed interactions enable those who are visually impaired to find them and to use them. we had worked with a statistician of Montgomery County, which adjoins the University of Maryland. She was, blind, but a super stats person who was just terrific with finding her way around data. And we learned a lot from her. And so there are strategies, and we should be putting them to work.
Fantastic. What was that person's name? Does she have a presence on the
here? I'd have to go back and look it up.
Right. I think we should move on. That was what a great introduction section. Thanks, Ben. So now the next section, we were going to talk about more, or you're going to talk more about what the modern Ben Shneiderman and what you've been doing around human-centered AI. So do you want to kick us off on this bit, Ben?
Yeah, let's go. Do I get the screen back? Here we go. Okay, so that's the world of human-centered AI, spelled the American way, and we'll take it down. So the goal is pretty clear: amplify, augment, empower, and enhance people. We're not we think that the design of interactive and exploratory interfaces and visual ones really are the way of the future. The goal is self-efficacy for individuals, creativity, support, responsibility, and their social connections. And always remember, people are not computers, computers are not people. I guess that news still has not reached everyone who believes that social robots are going to be the way of the future, and that computers will be like our friends, our teammates, our buddies, our collaborators, our partners. No, I don't think that's happening. In fact, yesterday's news that SoftBank, the Japanese conglomerate, is shutting down the Pepper robot sort of adds to that belief. So that's the important thing to remember. And, if you need any further reminder, my way is this bumper sticker: humans in the group, computers in the loop. And this reemphasizes that people are socially connected. They want to work with other people, and we need the computers when we want to put them in the loop. So that's what we're trying to get to. And the goal is a whole bunch of things that people have talked about. I've emphasized in my writings about reliable, safe, and trustworthy, but there's about 25 other terms that are out there: predictable, controllable, directable, usable, observable, comprehensible. We'll talk about explainable and interpretable in a little while, but we want all these other features like traceable and auditable and trackable, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to think about as we move into the new world where AI algorithms, machine learning, deep learning, and so on become important components of systems. But we need to understand how to make them components of systems that enable you to take control and own them. So it's all about enhancing human control. The old belief used to be that if you increase automation, you reduce human control. And that was Tom Sheridan's notion from 1980s on that was widely repeated, including by me. And only later I became troubled by that idea. And what I wanted to do was get high levels of human control and high levels of automation, not autonomy, but automation. So the way to get it is, believe it or not, visual design. And my pitch here is that the one set of metaphors and goals of intelligent agents, teammates, assured autonomy, and social robots are very popular notions. They're pervasive. And I have a tough job now. I need your help, everybody. The job is to shift the language to super tools and telebots, I'll call them, and control centers or supervised autonomy and active appliances. So there's a new language coming, and that's what we need to explore. So let me show you what some of these things look like. And my favorite example is the digital camera on your phone. It has a high degree of automation, but a high degree of human control. You point the camera where you want, you zoom as you like, you compose the picture, and you click for your decisive moment. Okay, that's your picture. At the same time, the AI and machine learning is setting the focus and the aperture, reducing hand jitter, and making you produce a pretty good picture. And that's transformed the world in the last 30 years, where 30 years ago, 10% of the population were pretty good photographers, okay? But now 90% of the population are pretty good photographers and can reliably turn out a photo, easily share it with their friends. They can edit in lots of ways, personalize it, add features, labels, draw on it, mix and merge, change the shadows, the brightness, the contrast, the lightness, and all those features. That's the best. That's what we want to see in the super tools of the future. The navigation choices and GPS systems here from the White House to College Park, the University of Maryland, just 8 miles away. The system gives you 3 choices of routes. That's the idea. That's what the AI does. It takes current data about traffic, shows you where the traffic congestion is, gives you 3 routes, and gives you estimated time. That's wonderful. But I'm in charge, and I choose which route I want to follow, and then I launch it. So that gets me going. Similarly, text and query completion. Search query completion, I start typing U Maryland and I get a bunch of suggestions. I can ignore them or I can take them, okay? And every recommender is, a similar version of that. Spelling correction is, another example. You get a choice and then you decide if you're going to use it. So this leads me to the new mantra. Here it is, folks, the new mantra. Preview first, all right? Give me the recommendations, preview the possibilities, show me the choices, then allow the user to select and initiate, and then show and control and manage the execution. So I think that's going to be the direction we go with these new kinds of visual interfaces. This also works for robot controls in the world. This is a nice work of Connor Brooks and Daniel Safir at University of Colorado Boulder. And they show a quadcopter, and this is the path it's going to take. So you can see where it's going, and then it's going to hover over this spot. So these kind of previews that show you what's going to happen in automated mode are really a valuable addition. Your active appliances increasingly are getting machine learning to adjust the thermostats and control your devices and your washing machines. But I think there's lots of good work to improve the visual design of these interfaces, which sometimes are kind of narrow and limited, but increasingly visual displays will show you what's happened already, what the current state of the machine is, and what's going to happen in the next 3 or 30 minutes. That's the kind of visualization we want. Similarly, things that we thought were autonomous, like the pacemaker embedded in your chest or the implantable defibrillator, becomes a controllable device. You control it on your phone, or your physicians, clinicians, or Medtronic monitors 10,000 of these and understands how to build better pacemakers for everyone. So, your pacemaker gets a morning update as well, and that's another possibility. The Mars rover, you'll get an argument at NASA. Is the Mars rover autonomous? Some love the idea of calling it autonomous. And it is autonomous. It can move around obstacles, avoid precipices, turn its antenna and solar panels automatically to point in the right directions. But hey, there's a whole control room back at NASA operating this thing and making sure it does the right things and produces the right kind of results, dealing with problems. And then there's the surgical robots. Newspaper journalists love to tell the story of robot surgeons do better than doctors, but it's not the story. The real story is that, as the manufacturer Da Vinci says, robots don't perform surgery. Your surgeon performs surgery with Da Vinci by using instruments that he or she guides via console. That's the way of the future, a visual display that lets you see where you are and enables you to make very precise operations in deep parts of the body. Much better for the operation, for the patient, faster recovery. Bloomberg Terminal is a great example. Every day, Bloomberg gets 1.6 million business articles, and they distill them into categories using wonderful machine learning and natural language processing algorithms, and then you get to present the data that you need for your decisions, whether you're managing a portfolio for yourself or an investment fund, or whether you're preparing a retirement plan. All these can be useful for the analyst. The basic design is spatially stable, tiled, not overlap displays, and the brushing and linking and interaction are well supported. And that's why more than 300,000 people pay $20,000 a year to have something like this on their desk. That's the kind of control center of the future. Here's a hospital control center, lots of visualization, lots of visual data display, lots of dashboards. And then terrorism control center also. People working together, but sharing information and getting information abundant displays. That's really the goal. That's what a control center is like. So that's it. Let me pause there and we'll take questions up to here.
Co-hosts, anybody want to jump in with a question for Ben for this one? Steve.
Well, I would say, go ahead. Yes, Steve, go ahead.
No, please, I defer.
Well, I think you and I were thinking maybe along some of the same lines. The examples that we're seeing here, a lot of them from the FinViz map over into some of these other examples, involve a lot of that kind of default red and green palette and focusing on the red and green contrast. As we go ahead and think through, again, accessibility being a big theme around data visualization, any thoughts on some of the colorblind accessibility challenges of that palette in particular and how widely used it?
Absolutely. I mean, all our work, and I should have mentioned along the way, red-green colorblind is a common and well understood problem. Almost all of our visualizations allow blue-yellow as a substitute color for that, and allowing users to set the color is just normal part of what it is to control a display. So, I'm all in favor of that, and your concern is absolutely right, and thank you for raising it.
I've got a question, Ben. Do you think the history of science fiction and literature and TV and the media anthropomorphizing artificial intelligence has led to some of the problems with what our expectations?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we have a long history going back to the 16th century of that idea. Karl Capek's play R.U.R. in 1920s was added to that, and Hollywood's infatuation with humanoid robots continues from HAL in 2001 to Ex Machina with Ava as a seductive robot who deceives the human to allowing her to get free. So yes, that idea continues, and the journalists I hold equally at fault for propagating an image that's entertaining. It's wonderful, but it's not going where we need it to go. And the continued failures of those social robot designs from the 1770s, where Jacques Droz, the Swiss watchmaker, made 3 humanoid robots that played musical instruments, wrote poems, and drew graphics. I mean, they've simply become the museum pieces for the next century. Yeah. And so too will Pepper, Nao, and the many other social robots. So I think we're seeing this shift now, the painful failures in the last few years of Curie and Cosmo and Jibo, one after another of these well-funded, highly visible social robots seems to indicate a clear pattern. I've got a great source that explains this, a new book by Simon Natale called Deceitful Media. And he describes, the Turing test and all of AI with the idea. It goes from banal deceptions, very, lightweight kind of things, which we all participate in. I mean, a graphic user interface is, after all, a deception. You don't really have folders and a desktop and a trash can, but it helps to explain it, to the more straight up deceptions, such as Google's duplex, which pretended to be a human and trying to make a restaurant reservation. So we're coming to understand that it's perfectly human to buy into these deceptions, and people will take advantage of that. But the real successful products like digital cameras, GPS navigation, search query completion, spelling checkers, Bloomberg terminals, one after another, they come from an understanding of human needs, building human self-efficacy, creativity, responsibility, and social connections. That's the pitch.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a great answer. I have a collection. I tag articles that use that Shutterstock, the white pensive-faced AI robot dude.
Oh yeah.
I'm just like, come on, it's about an algorithm. It doesn't need this.
You got to get past that. The visual metaphors are also a problem. The robot hand shaking the human hand, really bad. I worked very hard for my book and getting the cover right. You know, I had to keep working with the designers to say, no, take the robots out. You know, it's about people. It's about people. It's about people. The future is human-centered.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to go to, I want to take a question that's come in on the chat from Lucretia. In fact, there's loads of questions on the chat.
I was just going to say, if people are putting in the chat, they're sending a lot of questions to just the panelists, you can kick it over to all attendees so that people can kind of participate in those questions as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So choose all panelists and attendees. Lucretia says, so I asked this one now because you just talked about humans. So she says, any recommendations regarding oh, hang on, I'm going to stop this scrolling now. Regarding leadership in a data-dependent world, industrial age leadership versus technological computer age leadership. It seems at times the Lean Six Sigma type work team holds up progress. I hope it makes sense. Now I've just realized, did that question make sense? So yes, leadership in a data-dependent world.
I mean, that leadership is limiting was the point?
I've realized as I've read it, I think Lucretia, you need to retype that question, because as I read it, I was not quite sure which way you were going.
Well, I know we've got so many great questions coming in too. It may be worth also making sure that we hold a few for our after party time for folks to chat about too. We can revisit some of these in the after party if folks can stick around.
Why don't we do that?
I would say yes. It's going to take leadership to establish visualization, and the ideas that I'm promoting here. It does take a persistence and a clarity of vision and an understanding of what the powers are, and an understanding and a sympathy. I mean, there's a great enthusiasm for social robots and for autonomous systems and intelligent agents and that kind of notion. And so it will take a certain courageous leadership to step out and say, actually, that's not where we're going. We've got something else that's better than that. We really need to get past the ideas that haven't worked and move on to the ones that really have. I think the examples out there make it pretty clear what works. And what doesn't.
Absolutely. Yeah,
there's a question about what distinguishes a good visualization from a not so good visualization, and a related question about where data art fits in the field of data visualization.
Sure. No, I like the data art stuff. Martin Wattenberg, Fernando Viegas, and Luc Dubois, and many others have shown us great examples of data art. I've made some myself. You may know I did 12 tree maps that became, in the collection of the National Academy of Sciences and the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So those 12 tree maps are out there, and you can look at the tree map art webpage on WordPress that has them all, and download them, print them. A lot of people have printed them up full size, 24 by 36 inches, and put them on the walls of their offices as a way of telling the story there. They're free to do. You're open to it. If you want me to sign one, I'll do that, but you have to donate $500 to the University of Maryland.
Very good. We will send a webpage, a link to that, so people can do that if they wish. Brilliant. Well, look, we've got 9 minutes left of the pre-after party, which should give us a few more minutes to get onto your last section, Ben. You're going to talk about explainability in AI.
I sure am. The world of explainable AI, we know that explainability is really important. And explainability becomes a powerful tool, not for users only, but it's also for the developers and designers who come to understand what's going on. All right, there we go. You've got the screen. Keep going. So the benefits of explainability are to the developers of the system who come to understand much better what the system is doing and how it's performing in a somewhat different way. Great. I think so. You've seen the slide. Yeah, you're seeing it now, right? So this, the last part of the pitch is about governance structures. And let me just briefly cruise on to the practices that you want. I mean, the full paper has 15 recommendations. The ones we want to focus on are on the team. So keep going. And there's 5 recommendations. And I'll just mention briefly the one about audit trails, that, you know, every system ought to have an audit trail to track what happens so that when things go bad, you can go back, review it, and revise it. Essentially a flight data recorder for every robot, if you will. Okay. And yeah, we're coming here. So let's go on to the issue of explainable. That's the key message here in the remaining 10 minutes. There's a great deal of interest, and it's triggered, it's interesting, by the European GDPR requirement for general public data that requires that users have a right of explanation. And that happened about 7 years ago and triggered a huge explosion of innovative work in the AI community under the term XAI, Explainable AI. Now, you know, most of that work, and I've been looking at it very carefully, as careful as I could, is about retrospective explanations. So the AI gives you an answer as to why you were rejected from a mortgage, or you didn't get the job, or you didn't get the parole that you requested. Okay, those are sort of the typical examples. And then you get some kind of an explanation. And the big discussions have to do what kind of an explanation to give. You've gone a little bit further here. Go back up. Yeah, okay. So yeah, stay with that. Okay, so the retrospective explanations are either global or local. Global being, how does the system work? What's machine learning? What are neural nets? Local being, well, for your question, your application, here's what needs to be changed, maybe. These are called post hoc explanations. And they're almost always assume that it's a textual string. And I've had a very hard time. If some of the viewers here can show me examples, I'd love to see good visual examples of post hoc explanation user interfaces, especially using visual interfaces. Okay, so what I've come to see is that the new goal is actually to prevent confusion in the first place. Okay, and then you don't need explanations as often. And I would call these prospective user interfaces, or someone called them anti-hoc. And they're interactive, they're visual, and they're exploratory. Let's look at the example on the next slide. The mortgage explanation, you've got it. A typical example would be of a post hoc report, a retrospective explanation. You apply for a mortgage of $375,000. You say your monthly household income is $7,000 and your liquid assets are $48,000. Then you click submit, next slide, and you get an explanation. We're sorry, your mortgage loan was not approved. You might be approved if you reduce the mortgage amount requested, increase your household monthly income, or increase your liquid assets. This is generally seen as a very good example of post hoc explanation, because it tells you specifically what you need to change. On the other hand, it doesn't tell you how much and which one you're close and which ones you're far away from. Okay, so to me, this is inadequate. My visual version for the proposal is, next slide, is to say, give them sliders, okay? And give them the sliders that let them adjust the amounts, and they see the blue area is where they are. The score on the right-hand side goes up as they get more blue and they're needing to reach the green line. They can reduce the amount of mortgage requested. They can increase their monthly household income,
or increase the liquid assets. This gives them a chance to explore and understand the sensitivity of each one, how close they are, whether they're linear or nonlinear. And there's various forms of sliders that would show these visually as well. So you could have improved sliders, so-called scented sliders, that give you a smell of what it would be like if you move to the left or the right. And this gives the users a great sense of control. Skeptics have said, well, this just invites people to explore and play and lie. Well, you're right. Lying is bad with mortgage applications. It's illegal to do that. And so, yes, maybe it more of an invitation, but still the prohibition against lying is certainly still in place. But the capacity to explore, to understand is really important. Furthermore, critics say, well, this is only 3 features. Our system has 100 features. And yes, that becomes more of a challenge when you have many more features. Or I have 1 million features. And how do we deal with those? So those are challenges to go through further. But in some ways, if the system is so complicated, so difficult to understand, so unpredictable, then basically my answer is shut it down. And you really need to have systems which are explainable, interpretable, and comprehensible. There's a growing movement around this idea. Cynthia Rudin's excellent paper, which is just written so forcefully, stop explaining black box models. Stop explaining black box models. Her solution to the problem of confusion is to have simpler models. And her clever mathematical approach reduces the number of variables to something that makes a very small, compact, and very easy, not very, but easier to understand approach. Okay, so let's just take a look at a couple of examples of these. There's a delightful one, this visual interface with sliders from a British group of librarians, charming group. I had lovely discussions with them, but they wanted to develop a recommender system to recommend different novels for readers. And they allow you to select up to 4 sliders. And here, and I tried this out, you go from funny to serious, from beautiful to disgusting, from sexual, no sex content, to explicit sexual, from optimistic to bleak. And as you touch the sliders, the screen covers update immediately. And so it gives you a rapid way to explore. It's a delightful example, and I encourage you to try it. I mean, others have built many other examples. Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I just clicked a link to the article from Cynthia Rubin. Sorry, carry on.
And I just, one more example here. I mean, there's examples of newspaper recommenders where you have sliders for news, sports, and politics. As you move the news, the politics slider up, you get more politics and less sports. So it's very understandable of what the model is doing, but you're in control. That's the message from the beginning. Give users control, high degrees of automation, complex models and mathematics underneath the table, but users are in control. They can explore rapidly. This one is music based on 5 of the 14 variables in Spotify's music rating system. So you can slide for acousticness, instrumentalness, danceability, valence, and energy. And as you slide them, the recommendations shift on the right. And the further to the right box is an example from the OECD's Better Life Index, which lets you explore 195 countries to understand. So that's the end of the pitch. I guess the summary slide is next, but we can quit right here, take questions, and we've run out of time, but thanks for listening. I guess I repeat the story that the future is human-centered, that I think visualization will play a key role in developing our understanding of how powerful tools, AI tools, machine learning, deep learning, can be put to work in a way that gives users a better sense of understanding and control. And the visual strategies developed in this community over the last 3 decades are going to be an important part of that solution. Let's do it. It's important.
It is indeed. Oh, Ben, thank you so much. What a great way to end. What a great way to end that 3rd section. The chat is not necessarily over because it's time for the after party. Because I'm sure there are many questions from that last section and loads of questions as well. So we are going to transition now to the after party mode, where all of you watching, all of you who want to stick around, you are welcome to stick around, and we'll have a much more free-form Q&A with Ben. If you have to go and do something else, then that's absolutely fine too. And in fact, I unfortunately have to go somewhere else and go see a doctor. So I am going to say a big thank you to Ben. Thank you to my
Thank you all. Right.
So we're about to transition. Everyone's going to become a panelist. I'm going to turn the recorder off, and we will be taking a summer break. So Chart Chat will return, although we're going to go to the after party in a minute, sometime in September. And as Ben is delightfully plugging the Data Visualization Society, I'm sure
bye everybody.
Sorry, please. Andy,
bye everyone.
Great to see you.
See you
Farewell.